Hi, and welcome to this webinar for educators. My name is Megan Chabalowski, and I am a program officer in the Global Peacebuilding Center at the U.S. Institute of Peace. So in this webinar, I'm going to introduce you to Global Peacebuilding Center resources that will help you bring peacebuilding themes and skills into your classrooms and other educational settings. You will be able to find all the resources I discuss, as well as additional ones, on our website at www.buildingpeace.org. So at the end of this webinar, I will share our contact information, and I hope that you will email us to let us know if this has been helpful or with any suggestions or questions you might have. So I thought I'd first start off by providing you a little background on the U.S. Institute of Peace to frame our conversation. USIP is our nation's International Conflict Management Center. We were founded in 1984 by Congress, and we are an independent, federally funded institution, so we are completely funded by Congress. And our mission, our mandate, is to prevent, manage, and resolve international conflicts without violence. We only work on international conflicts, not on conflicts within our domestic borders. You can learn more about USIP's work here at this link, www.usip.org. So here at USIP, we believe strongly in the power of young people to be peace builders. We work very closely with young people around the world. So the Global Peacebuilding Center at the Institute works with the next generation to prepare them for and engage them in peace building, right now, in their own communities and globally. We do this in several different ways, so here are our approaches. We have a core curriculum unit called the Peacebuilding Toolkit for Educators. It includes lessons and activities that help teachers incorporate these themes and skills of international conflict management and peace building into their classrooms, and we're going to talk a bit more about that over the next half hour in this webinar. We also have a student educator-oriented website that includes additional resources for teachers and for students. And we do offer on-site educational programs for students and trainings for teachers on our resources, as well as on just using these themes in your classroom or in your school. We're going to focus a lot of our webinar today on the lessons and activities in our Peacebuilding Toolkit for Educators, which you see in these two pictures here. It was developed by teachers for teachers, and it's based on USIP trainings that we've run with adult practitioners around the world. We've taken these trainings and translated them for a younger audience. We do have a middle school version and a high school version. We do not have an elementary school version, but I do know elementary school teachers who have used the middle school version with a little adaptation. So it could be used, and in fact, I would love to hear if you're an elementary school teacher and you use it, I would love to hear how you've managed to use it. You can download both for free in English, French, Spanish, and Arabic at the link at the bottom on our website. And the toolkit has been aligned, all the lessons and activities have been aligned with both the 10 themes outlined by NCSS and with Common Core standards. So you can also find the alignment with Common Core standards at that same link. The lessons and activities in the toolkit are meant to be very flexible. So you can either use it as a unit, you could go work your way through the whole toolkit. I know a teacher who had an hour each week to work her way through the toolkit with her students. I also know a teacher who pulled out key activities that she then incorporated into her IB history class, key activities, key lessons. So she fitted into her existing curriculum in pieces. Each lesson also has extension activities in blue boxes on the side. So if you only have 10 minutes or 15 minutes but would still like to do something with your students, or if you would like to send them off with some homework or an external project to do, you can use an extension activity to do so. The lessons and activities in the toolkit are all experiential and interactive. They're student-driven, so the teacher is there as a facilitator more than as a teacher. And it's really based on students' previous knowledge. It draws on their experiences that they bring to the room, to the situations, to the activities. So the toolkits are organized around 3 themes that you see here. These are basic ideas within the field of international conflict management that we organize our work at the Institute around, so we have decided to organize our curriculum around them as well. The first is that conflict is an inherent part of the human condition. We will always have conflict in our lives. Conflict is not going anywhere, and it's natural. Conflict in itself is neutral. It's how we manage the conflict that decides whether it's going to be destructive or whether it can be a positive force for change. So this leads us into the second theme, which is that violent conflict can be prevented. So the lessons in this theme really focus on the skills of conflict management. The third theme is that there are many ways to be a peace builder. So in the final part of the toolkit, students explore all the various peace builders around the world, all the different activities that they're doing, the ways they're building peace, and then they think about ways they can engage in it themselves. So in the toolkit, you can also find guidelines for teaching peace building. So while these guidelines are basically good teaching practices, but they're important to keep in mind for when you're teaching about conflict and peace and are trying to integrate these topics into your curriculum. So you'll see these themes running throughout all the lessons in the toolkit, and they are the thread that really ties the lessons together. So the first guideline is to bridge the local and the global. When we're talking about an issue of conflict or peace internationally, somewhere across the globe, or a big international topic, it helps to really connect it back to students' own lives. So, for example, if we want to talk about mediation, maybe Secretary Kerry mediating conflict in the Middle East, then we can connect that back to how students mediate conflict in their own lives, because we mediate conflict all the time between friends, between family members, and we use specific skills. So our lesson on mediation really helps students develop mediation skills to use in their own lives, and then connects it to the global and asks them to look for examples of mediation around the world and to see connections between the skills that they use in their own lives and the skills that Secretary Kerry needs to use to mediate peace in the Middle East. And this helps answer the question of, why should I care? Why does this matter to me? Because now they're able to draw these connections between what this looks like in their own lives and what it looks like globally. The next guideline is to emphasize multiple perspectives. So when we talk about conflict and peace, we often talk about some difficult subjects, and lots of different opinions are going to come up. And that's good. We want to encourage students to bring out their different perspectives and to appreciate other people's perspectives. To understand that it's okay to have a little conflict over differing opinions, and to develop skills to really listen to each other so they can understand another person's perspective. So one activity that we do to really introduce the importance of multiple perspectives is called paper folding. So I'll talk you through this activity here. It's not in our toolkit, but it is on our website, and so I've put a link at the bottom to the lesson where you can find it. And this activity is useful if you have a new group of students and you want to introduce the topic of perspectives, of listening to each other, of our previous experiences that we bring to the same situation. There's lots of ways you can use this activity. So you see the picture up top, students are engaging in this activity. So what you ask them to do is to stand up. You hand out a blank piece of paper to every student and ask them to hold the piece of paper in their hands. They don't need anything else, and to close their eyes. You then tell them that you are going to give them a series of instructions that they are to follow with their eyes closed and to not ask any questions, that you will give them all the information they need. So the instructions are: fold the paper in half, tear off the bottom right corner of the paper, fold the paper in half again, tear off the lower left-hand corner. So you then ask students to unfold their paper and to hold it over their heads, then to open their eyes and look around. So what you'll immediately hear is maybe some laughter. People are surprised because there are lots of different papers. And in fact, you can see these are some examples of papers from the same activity, so the same group. And then you have a conversation around that. So what do you notice? What did you notice when you opened your eyes? How did you feel when you looked around and saw everyone's papers compared to yours? Did anyone feel they did it incorrectly, that they didn't do the exercise well? How can there be so many different interpretations when I gave the same instructions to everyone? So was there one right way to do this? So you can kind of connect this to conflict. You can talk about how multiple perspectives can lead to conflict. You can talk about peace building, how it's important to have many different understandings, many different perspectives to build peace. So there's a lot of ways you can tie this into whatever you want to teach. But this is one great activity to start talking about the different perspectives, the different understandings we all bring to the same situation. So going back to the guidelines, the next one is to teach dialogue skills, and this connects really closely to multiple perspectives. We do a lot of debate in school. We don't do as much dialogue. You can have a formal dialogue process, or you can just have a dialogic approach. So in debate, you have a winner or loser. You know, you will argue your point. You try to prove that your point is correct. In dialogue, we're communicating to understand. So we're communicating to develop a better understanding of the other person's perspective. So it's very different. There's no winner or loser. It's win-win because the goal is just to develop an understanding. The next guideline is to focus on individuals, to translate statistics into people. So when we're talking about conflict, conflict can be a very big issue. You can talk about child soldiers and say, you know, there are 300,000 child soldiers in the world. I think that statistic's a little old. I think it came about 3 years ago, but still a massive statistic. But when you start to then talk about one particular child soldier and to tell his or her story, perhaps about finding his or her way home after a war, then students can start to connect with that soldier in a way that they can't connect with that broad statistic. And they can also start thinking about what they can do to make a difference. So this ties into that next guideline of sharing real stories, the real story of one individual person. And there are lots of stories out there, and you can find some individual stories on our website and on USIP's website as well. And last but not least is leave students feeling empowered. So we're telling these stories because we want students to think about what they can do about it. So to talk about leaving students feeling empowered, I often use this despair empowerment curve. So this curve was developed by Sheldon Berman. At the link you see below, you can find the complete article from which I took the curve. So he says when we come into a situation, when we're learning about a particular problem or a particular conflict, we start off on this left-hand side here with a basic amount of information. Then we start to learn more, and we start to sink into, you know, the pit of despair, because we're learning about all of the problems, all of what led to the conflict, what's happened, why it hasn't been able to be solved, and we end up in despair. I don't know about you, but that's sort of how I feel when I read the news. If I sit here in my morning and I go flip through the headlines, and I end up in this pit of despair at thinking about all the conflict that's happening around the world, all the world's problems. But we don't want to be left in the pit of despair, and we certainly don't want to leave our students there. Want to bring them out of it and leave them feeling empowered to do something about it. So you do this by dealing with their feelings, by talking about how you feel about this, by going more deeply into the subject. So we have a great conflict analysis lesson in the toolkit that helps students really do a thorough analysis of the conflict they're studying to understand the causes, what's been tried, what worked, what didn't work to resolve the conflict. To teach strategies for conflict resolution and dialogue, give them the skills they need in order to do something about it, and then provide opportunities. So take these skills and turn it into action. And that's how you can leave students feeling empowered. And for us at the Institute and the Global Peacebuilding Center, this is really important because when we talk a lot about international conflicts. So we want to leave students understanding what they can do about it. That even though you're an American student, there's still something you can do about conflict in Syria, or there's still something you can do about conflict between Israel and the Palestinian territories, and to have opportunities to do so. So I thought I would take you through just a couple activities from the toolkit so you can just get a sense of what they're like. So the first one is from the very first lesson, which is about defining conflict. The next activity I'm going to take you through is from the second lesson about defining peace. So each of these lessons tries to help students think through the gray areas of conflict and peace and what these gray areas mean to them so that they can come up with their own definitions. So we don't want to provide definitions about conflict and peace to students. We want them to come up with it. So the lessons I'm doing now are a simplified version of what you'll find in the toolkit. It's actually an activity pulled from a much richer lesson plan, but it's just to give you a taste. So you see my colleague here in the picture running this activity with a group here at USIP. So what you do is you ask students to tell you the first words that come to mind when you say conflict is. What is conflict? And you can write them up on the board. And so you take a number of words that students come up with. And here you can see that they thought of argument, disagreements, war, opposing views, fights, discrimination, and finding solutions. Then you can have a conversation around the words that students came up with. So you can ask, what do these words have in common? And when you look at this list, and this list is representative of pretty much all the lists you're going to come up with every time I've done this activity, certainly, that students will say, all these words, most of the words are very negative. So you can have a conversation around that. Is conflict always negative? When can it be positive? Where does this attitude come from? Why do we feel like conflict is negative? And how does it affect how we approach conflict in our own lives? And then you can tie this into peace building to think through what's the connection between conflict and peace? Then this lesson plan goes on to help students come up with their own definition of conflict based on these words that they came up with. The next activity is to look at peace. So the next activity I am going to share is from the second lesson, and it is about defining peace. So the activity is we call it the peace not peace activity, and it's essentially a human continuum. So if you look over the student's head against the far wall, you can kind of see a sign that says not peace, and then imagine that across the room is a sign that says peace. So you inform students that you are going to read them a statement. After they hear the statement, they are to stand somewhere along the line of where they think that statement falls. Is it peace? Is it not peace? Is it somewhere in the middle? And the only rule is that there is no exact middle. You cannot be neutral, so you have to take a stance one way or the other. Then after they have found their spot, they will have the opportunity to share why they're standing where they are. And you can inform them that as they're sharing, if they want to move, they're welcome to move somewhere along the line. So I thought I would read you some of the statements. In the toolkit, you have sample statements that you can use. So I thought I'd share with you just a couple of them to give you a sense of what the toolkit contains. So the first statement is from a grouping of personal statements. So you arrive at home and your mom has taken money off your dresser without asking. This frustrates you, but you don't say anything because you don't want to cause a fight. So you read the statement, ask students to move, and then once they've found their spot, you ask them to share why they're standing where they are. So after everyone, or as many people as you'd like, have had a chance to share, you can read another statement. And this is within the local context. So a high school hires armed security guards to manage school violence. Once again, students move and have the chance to share. Then there's an international context. So humanitarian aid with medical supplies and fresh water reaches a community affected by conflict. So students then have a chance to move again and to share. And you can read as many or as few statements as you'd like. You can come up with your own based on what you're teaching. So once you've gone through this activity, then you ask students to take a seat and you can debrief it. You can ask them, what did you notice in this activity? Students will talk about, they noticed that a lot of people had many different ideas on one particular statement. Some people thought it was peace and some thought it was not peace. And then even within peace, students had different reasons for standing on the peace side or different reasons for standing on the not peace side. They'll talk about that there are many ways, it showed them that there were many ways to think about and to view peace and to think about and view the opposite of peace. That it will look different to each person. And sometimes students will move, so then you can have a conversation around, well, why did you move? Or did anyone feel like moving and not move? Another theme that comes up a lot is students will want to ask questions about the statement. And they'll say, well, I don't have enough information. So that's an opportunity to have a conversation around gathering information about a particular context, a particular situation before drawing conclusions about it. And once again, you could direct them back to our conflict analysis lesson and talk about why it's so important to do a thorough analysis of a conflict. You did notice that I shared the statements with you in different groupings, in the personal context, in the local context, and in the international context. So this activity goes back to the guideline of thinking local to global, because it's also then useful to think about how do our perspectives on peace and the opposite of peace change when we think local, personal to local to international. One thing that's also really important in this activity is to make sure it's a dialogue. So students will sometimes want to debate. They'll say, well, I agree with you, but, in response to another student. And so you want to avoid that, because the point of this activity is to really get all the different perspectives out there and to leave them there. So that's the second activity I wanted to show you. I thought I would just talk through really quickly the last two themes in the toolkit. So the theme 2, violent conflict can be prevented. This is the section with lessons and activities around key conflict management skills. So students get to identify their conflict style. Are you an avoider? Are you an accommodator? Are you an aggressor? What style do you have when you enter conflict? They learn about conflict analysis, and then they learn key communication skills. So nonverbal communication, active listening, negotiation, mediation. And within all of these, they're role-playing, they're practicing the skills, and then they're also, in negotiation and mediation, getting to do some simulations. So they are thinking about it from locally, they're doing role plays about what negotiation and mediation look like in their own lives, to doing simulations at a global level. The final theme, there are many ways to be a peace builder, contains lessons that look at different people. Who are peace builders? What are their characteristics? Which characteristics do you see in yourself? And different organizations that are working for peace. And then it ends with a student action plan. So it asks students to come up with a conflict that is important to them, or an issue that's important to them, and create a plan around it. How can they take action? And then actually ask them to go out and do it. So we want to end on a note of students taking action. So I hope that gives you a sense of our toolkit, and that you've started thinking of ways you could use it in your classroom. The last thing I wanted to do was to point you to additional online resources and activities, both for you and for your students. So when students come to our website, the easiest way for them to navigate through it is to sign up for their virtual passport, which you see at the upper right-hand corner. So when they sign up for their passport, they will be taken through a series of activities, quizzes, crossword puzzles that help them gain new knowledge and skills in peace building. So after they complete each activity, they collect a stamp and the passport, and then at the end, they receive a certificate from USIP saying that they are global peace builders. One thing that they will do is to learn about famous peace builders. So they go through a quiz that quizzes them about Nobel Peace Prize winners, and then gives them some additional information about the individual, whether they answer correctly or incorrectly. There's also an online conflict styles assessment, so it's in our toolkit, but we also have one, I think the only free conflict styles assessment online that your students can go through, or you can go through yourself. There is a crossword puzzle about peace events of the 20th and 21st centuries. There are other crossword puzzles that they can do about different peace-building themes. And they'll learn about conflicts going on around the world in places where the U.S. Institute of Peace works, and they'll get to answer some questions about these particular conflicts. They'll also have an opportunity to ask an expert at USIP a question about a particular topic or issue. This is a forum that is updated regularly, where we feature new topics on issues that are current and are in the headlines. On our website, we also have our video series, Witnesses to Peacebuilding. So these are 6 short videos, about 2 to 4 minutes each, that tell the story of individual peace builders around the world. So it's a way to put faces to peace building and once again show that there are lots of different people building peace in lots of different ways. So you can also find lesson plans and discussion guides to accompany each video on our website. And last but not least, we have a section for educators. So in this section, you can find the toolkit, you can find additional resources, quick activities, multimedia. Our Peace Events of the 20th and 21st Centuries is a list of historical events that you don't often hear about and ideas for ways to teach about them. You can join our educator network and communicate with other educators in our forum. You can visit us, receive a training here with fellow teachers, and then there are additional recommended resources. So that's our recorded webinar for you about using our resources to bring peace building into the classroom. We hope it's been useful. Thank you for taking the time to listen to it, and that we hope you'll take the time to explore our website. So please do contact us. This is my name and contact information, as well as our general Building Peace email address. Let me know if you have any questions or comments, and we'd love to hear from you. So thanks again.